You're very welcome to Radio Espial, episode 53. This is the third part of our Missing and Murdered series, The Forgotten Cases. More about that in a second. First of all, most importantly, thank you all to our recent subscribers to Radio Espial, www.radioespial.com. You're probably watching this here on our YouTube channel. Thank you very much. The channel continues to grow, and we're all very humbled that our audience has decided that Radio Espial is their go-to place for critical true crime case timelines, case features and updates, and we take a particular interest in Irish true crime cases. It's hard to believe that we're now on the cusp of 2,000 subscribers. Our Radio Espial community, which is free to join on Facebook. There you can interact with fellow channel members. We will also add our timeline links in the below episode for cases that we mention and playlists. Let's get straight to this episode. Missing and Murdered, Part 3, The Forgotten Cases. And let's go straight over to Brian Goggin, who is going to present most of this episode.
Hello folks, welcome to episode 53 of Radio Espial, and we're on part 3 of the so-called Vanishing Triangle of missing women in Ireland, and this follows on from part 2, which we presented 2 weeks ago. And before that, our first episode dealt with the problem of misinformation on these cases from the mainstream media, social media and elsewhere, and it can be extremely damaging, as we said, to missing persons cases, damaging to the victims' memories and to the families who toil relentlessly on behalf of their loved ones to get answers. Now, again, we're going to repeat ourselves again, but we'd ask you please to keep your eyes open when reading or viewing material about all these cases. And our mantra remains, be objective, do your own case homework, and always question the source and their motivations when you read something or view something. Now, so the first one dealt with misinformation. The second installment looked at the 6 of the original Operation Trace cases in more detail, and kept the promise of that was in the title of Shattering the Vanishing Triangle Illusion, by examining the facts and discussing the respective suspects for the 6 initial Operation Trace victims, and debunked the commonality theory and the serial killer theories as well. So the third episode that we have today follows on from those first 2, and we deal with the forgotten cases. Now, we're looking at 6 much lower profile unsolved cases of missing women. Some of them were presumed murdered, and some of them were confirmed murdered when their remains were found. Now, these very tragic cases are often considered on the periphery of the mythical Vanishing Triangle, and have sadly been neglected by the media and authorities as well, and others that should be honouring their memories and showing those victims and their families the proper respect and support for that they deserve. So I'll just give a quick bit of background, and then we'll get into the cases. Now, following on from the establishment of Operation Trace in 1998, with the initial 6 cases we discussed in part 2, the remit of the task force was extended to include several more cases. Now, we've done up a table there, so you can just see there. I'm not going to list out what each field does. It's self-explanatory there, but just to say what happened there, they had the following cases: Phyllis Murphy, who disappeared in 1979 and her remains were found in 1980, and John Crerar was convicted for that. Then we have 4 more unsolved cases. The murder of Antoinette Smith, she went missing in 1987 July and remains found April 1988. Inga Maria Hauser, who was a German teenager who came visiting in Belfast, and she was disappeared on 6th of April 1988 when she came off the ferry in Larne, and her remains were found 2 weeks later exactly in Ballypatrick Forest Park. Patricia Doherty from Tala went missing in December 1991, and her remains were found in June 1992. And Mary Kilmartin went missing December 1993 from Portlaoise, and her remains were found in June 1994 in Pims Lane Bog, the Laois Offaly border there. Now, there's some other cases then. Eva Brennan, the case was solved. Philip Colgan was convicted of her murder in 1999, and that was in the Dublin Mountains. So just to call out there as well, the remains of Antoinette Smith, Patricia Doherty, and Eva Brennan were all found in the Dublin Mountains there. Arlene Atkinson up in Ulster again. She was missing from Bundoran. She was going to a disco, and she's never been found. And Robert Howard is the who was a neighbour at the time. She was last seen getting into a car with him, and he's a strong suspect, the only suspect in that case, really. And Arlene Atkinson hasn't been found yet, and that was 1994. Then we've two other cases of with women there, abductions and sexual assault. Now, in December 1994, there was a lady taken by Thomas Stokes and Adrian Power, and they were both convicted there, and they launched horrific sexual assaults on her, both of them, and I think it could have ended up in her death. It didn't, for some reason, that night anyway, and there was horrific assaults, and thankfully they were apprehended for that. She was 20 years old, that woman, and then we have the last case there from February 2000, where that Larry Murphy was convicted of. He was caught red-handed by two hunters. He launched a series of horrific sexual assaults on physical assaults on a lady in Carlow Town, and then abducted her, and she was found at Spinnan's Cross. So thankfully the last two ladies survived there. They're not the same person. The lady in Carlow and the lady in Dublin are not the same person there, but they thankfully survived, but dreadful assaults there. So in the Forgotten Cases episode tonight, we'll discuss the disappearance and murders of Antoinette Smith, Patricia Doherty and Mary Kilmartin, as well as three cases not included in Operation Trace, and that's the disappearances of Eva Brennan, Claire Boylan and Imelda Keenan. Now, Eva Brennan and Claire Boylan, both in Dublin. Imelda Keenan disappeared from Waterford City in 1994. Now, just to call out as well, misinformation is a big problem. As we talked about in the first episode, it's just all over the place, and still with these cases are no exception. So in particular, I think false narratives are a constant theme here, and just three main examples of that there, just broke it out there. You can have unofficial narratives from sources like the mainstream media, social media, chatter, rumours, gossip, and we all know about that. You can see that everywhere. Also, which is can create enormous brick walls, official narratives from authorities, public bodies in other areas there as well. And unfortunately, when such a narrative takes form, then it can often be in place for decades, and where new information or new evidence comes up with authorities, they can be slow to or completely unwilling to accept it if it conflicts with their official narratives. And we saw that with other cases, not in scope for this. Dean Roach's disappearance some time back there with a car that was believed to have picked him up, and witnesses said that a car was in the locality and thought it may have picked him up, and the Gardaí won't acknowledge that at all. So things like that, it can be very difficult to break through an official narrative if in cases like that. Now, what might sound contradictory, unofficial, official narratives, and this isn't some sort of 1984 style doublespeak here, but Garda sources have reported missing person cases in Ireland that have been deprioritised or not treated as urgent due to suppositions and beliefs and prejudices about the missing person. Now, for example, they just went off, they went off to England, we thought, or prejudging a victim by assuming they died by suicide and allowing a case to just lose impetus to the point that in some instances they're just completely deprioritised. And we'll see that later in this episode as well. And, whether the person is thought to have died of suicide or not, they should still be afforded the same investigation as early as possible to try and determine what happened to them. So, just to say, there will be a follow-up episode on Larry Murphy, and needless to say, we're going to get this out there and off the bat straight away. Many people believe Murphy's in the shadows, and he's constantly mentioned in relation to some of these cases. But where there's no firm suspect, he's no more suspect than anybody else if there's no physical evidence of that. And there's been some dangerous either intentionally or unintentionally loaded in correct statements about in relation to him. You know, like there will be no further disappearances following his arrest was one thing I read, which is not true, because I mean, even the case we're looking at tonight, in the Leinster area, Claire Boylan went missing in 2003 when he was in jail. Ezra Iron went missing in 2011 after he'd left the country, and there was no way he was going to be back in any time after that. So, you know, this focus on Larry Murphy is unfortunate. It has serious implications for public perception and progression of cases related to Operation Trace and beyond, because we're looking at other cases here that are often considered on the periphery that aren't necessarily under the remit of Operation Trace. And to put it bluntly, Larry Murphy wasn't the only violent, predatory pervert around at the time. And so I think, you know, we could put together a whole rogues gallery of similar predators active at the time. And even more disturbing, there's even more that they didn't know about and have still evaded justice. So it just seems bizarre that Larry Murphy seems to be the only one that some people want to consider in relation to a lot of these cases. And we saw already in the last episode that, you know, he's, you know, out of those 6 cases, there's only one, and that's on flimsy enough evidence that he was considered as a serious suspect for it anyway. Anyway, that's enough of that. So there will be an upcoming episode to look at him and his crimes there anyway.
Brian?
Mick,
yeah, just before we get into the specific cases, thanks again for putting this episode together. Yeah, it's kind of like we go around in circles sometimes with Larry Murphy.
Yeah.
Our next episode will actually be on Larry Murphy next week, and I kind of consider it more of a standalone episode, because for reasons that you've very articulately put forward, we don't want to associate it with the Ireland's so-called Vanishing Triangle for many reasons we've discussed in the previous 2 episodes. Just this week, as an offside, when I was beginning the research on the forthcoming case on that, and in relation to that 28-year-old woman you talked about, the businesswoman from Carlow that Larry Murphy abducted, and again I say this all the time, Larry Murphy has never been convicted of any murder. He's consistently described in the media as serial killer, potential serial killer. Larry Murphy has never been convicted of murder. He was convicted of abducting and raping a woman and connected with a series of other abductions. That one that Brian has talked about was the businesswoman from Carlow in 2000, and where the links, you talked about Claire Boylan. I've even heard him associated with the Ciara Breen case. The man was in prison at the time, and I've heard so many connections, or he wasn't even in the country at certain times where he's connected to cases. And I think people almost in this myth that's been created with the Ireland's Vanishing Triangle have forgotten what age Larry Murphy himself is. He wasn't around for some of those early 1980s cases. He could not be connected unless you think there was some 12 or 15-year-old going around abducting women and killing women. And I think people forget a lot of those aspects and just don't actually think through what their associations are. I'm sorry, I'm not going off on a tangent. Is there anything more you want to say, Brian, before we get into the individual cases?
Yeah, agreed, Mick. So agreed there. So yeah, let's get into the cases, Mick.
Yeah, away you go.
All right. So we're not going to do these in chronological order, folks. We're going to start with Mary Kilmartin. Now, you can see the links will be underneath there. So see episode 49 of Radio Espial for the full timeline of Mary Kilmartin's disappearance and murder. And Mick very quickly turned around episode 50, following on from that, with her daughter Anya's testimony on the case. So, but please watch them in order. So you get the timeline first, and then get Anya's testimony, and they complement each other there well, and you'll get there's a wealth of information on the case there. Now, just a quick case summary. We're not going to deep dive into these because the timelines are there. So please watch the complete timelines if you're unfamiliar with some of these cases. So we'll just give a quick summary and then into the discussion. Okay. So no, Mary Kilmartin was 35 years of age. She disappeared. She was from a place called Balad, County Laois, and she tended to work as a local daycare nursing home. Excuse me. In the Portlaoise area social services, PASS. Now at 11 a.m. on 16th of December 1993, so it was in the run up to Christmas 93, and at 3:45 p.m. two of Mary's female co-workers dropped her home and watched her walk to her front door. Now when her housemate arrived home from her job at 6 p.m, she found that Mary wasn't there and none of the lights in the house were switched on. Now the housemate also found that the house alarm was set and her groceries were still unpacked, hanging on the kitchen chair. Now, forensic examination of Mary Kilmartin's home uncovered no evidence of a break-in, nor what may have led to her sudden disappearance. And the Gardaí did discover that around 4:20 p.m. on the same day, 16 December, a phone call was made to her landline phone at the house, which lasted for 2.5 minutes. Now, the call was traced to a payphone in Portlaoise near St. Fintan's Hospital, and a witness would later come forward to say that she saw a lone male entering the phone box near St. Fintan's at the time the call was made. She described the man as 30 years of age, 5'6" to 5'9" in height, and having dark hair. Now, this particular individual has never been publicly identified. Now, she was reportedly spotted the following morning again at two local areas by people known to her, and they had some brief exchanges with her as well. Now, and that was it then. So she disappeared at that point then, and on 10th of June 1994, 6 months after her disappearance, Mary Kilmartin's body was discovered at Pims Lane near Mount Mellick, County Laois, which is 16 kilometres, about 10 miles from her home. And her body was partially concealed in a bog drainage ditch with a cement block placed on it, and a gas canister and a pram were also covering her remains. And it's likely that the receding water level led to the discovery in the remote bog area. Now, a post-mortem revealed she'd been strangled, but there was no evidence of a sexual assault. So that was a very tragic case. Now, above are the known facts of the case there. Beyond that, the official narrative just also includes, there's documented testimony from Mary's housemate. She was Patricia Doyle, or Pat for short, Pat Doyle, and she worked in the hospital originally as well. Now, there was accusations of her murder against two men in 1994, and again in 2008, along with another woman close to the two men. Now, while Mary Kilmartin did suffer from mental health issues previously, it was also reported that she had a very low IQ. And then we had a Crime Line episode about her disappearance, which was screened in February 1994, 2 months after she went missing, but over 3 months before her remains were discovered. And this had some bizarre features, really. An interview with the housemate, Pat Doyle, and having watched that repeatedly, it just gets more and more peculiar the more times you watch it. Very, very strange interview. So that's included in episode 49 there, so you can judge for yourselves there. There's a certain portrayal of Mary Kilmartin's character and personality in that Crime Line episode as well. Now, the reality is very different, and there's revelations in Radio Spoil episode 49 and 50 that blow this narrative completely out of the water. So please watch them, and you get the full story there. And particularly in episode 50, we have a very frank and candid testimony from Mary Kilmartin's daughter, Anya, about her tragic disappearance and murder. Now, Mary had Anya when she was very young. She was only about 20 when she was 22 when Anya was born, and she was raised by another family member because Mary wasn't married at the time, and she was raised by another family member and adopted there. And while this was back in 1980, so she was adopted out then. And when she met Mary at some of the family occasions, but did not discover the truth until after her tragic death about who her mother really was. So in relation to official narrative, which was held almost constant for 30 years, right up to this year really, Anya has satisfied herself that none of the suspects who were arrested in 1994 and 2008 were responsible for her mother's disappearance or murder. She did that research herself, and connected with them herself. And the main person of interest had formed for other behaviour as well. So he was an easy and conveniently placed target for certain people to make accusations about him. It was a classic case of blame the local, head the ball there, because he was, he was an easy enough guy to blame for it. So again, the other thing that we have doubt about now is it was reported that a file was sent to the DPP about those people, but that's no questionable anyway. And even if there was information in the file, it's doubtful there was any evidence of substance anyway, and nothing else happened, you know. Now, that's sort of the more around the suspects and so on there. I think as well there was incorrect information about Mary Kilmartin's character also that proliferated as well, and she did suffer some mental illness and she had some phobias. She was agoraphobic. She had a fear of open spaces. She had a fear of the dark, and there's several types of fear of the dark there, so we're not going to speculate on which one it was, you know, but either way, she didn't like open spaces, didn't like the dark, and she did not have a very low IQ either. And she certainly wasn't. I mean, looking at the crime line reconstruction, I just put together 6 photos there. The 4 snaps on the left are of Mary Kilmartin herself. The 2 on the right, vertically, are the actress portraying Mary Kilmartin. And I think, as they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So I think if you look at those photos, you can see clearly it wasn't. I know you obviously you've watched the film as well, or have known Mary in the flesh, but I think those pictures give a good indication that wasn't an accurate representation of Mary Kilmartin. You look at the 4 pictures there, even when she was coming into up towards middle age and she had glasses, she still didn't look like the peculiar jumpy individual that was portrayed in the Crime Line episodes. The portrayal there was almost like she was afraid of her own shadow and really a bit socially inept and so on. That wasn't a fair representation, I think, there either. No,
Brian, can I just I think it's important because, you know, look, I think it was David Harvey Productions. Productions that did that. And look, we want to emphasize here, in respect of the actress or person who portrayed Marie Kilmartin in that, we're not making any, you know, look, I'm sure she followed producer and director, you know, of how she should portray
did her job.
Marie. She did her job, and that's it. And we're not in any way making, but in that episode of Crime Line that did the reconstruction, and in our time dealing with Anya and people who knew Marie, the person portrayed in that reconstruction is not entirely accurate of the Marie Kilmartin that we think we know better. And as Brian has rightly said, she was not quite the exaggerated, jumpy character that seems to be portrayed in it. Brian, sorry, interrupting.
No.
Go ahead.
Spot on, Mick. Yeah, we're not. So I mean, and just further on that show as well, just the Pat Doyle interview was full of peculiarities, as we said, in terms of her demeanour in particular. I mean, it's just, you know, if your housemate who you've been living with for 13 years was missing for weeks, you know, and just a whole range of emotions she described, but all kind of delivered in this kind of way she delivered it. So you just watch it and you'll see for yourself. I
think we said it before as well. What struck me was there's clearly, in my mind, when the reconstruction was done and they filmed it, there was clearly some objective by Pat Doyle with the camera crew, because she consistently keeps making references to it. Do you want to see the room? Oh, she had her clothes already packed. There was such an emphasis on her wanting the camera crew to go into the room and see all the clothes carefully laid out that she'd been supposedly packing in, the presents she was putting away for several. and it just struck both you and me, Brian, that this was odd, this was peculiar. Okay, mention it once, but why keep mentioning it? It was like she wanted to convince everybody, oh, Pat's gone off. Pat disappeared. She was planning something. See, she wasn't really going to meet up with the parents to go over for Christmas. She was planning something more, and it just came across as bizarre, that whole reconstruction.
The emotion she was talking about, how she went from she was worried, she was angry, she was delighted with the phone call. It was just, it was strange, and then just peculiar in terms of demeanour. What she said and how she said it, and then the bag was a bit red herring there as well, But again, just to reiterate again, like what Mick said there as well, and to be fair to producer David Harvey, that was a great show, Crime Line, and he wasn't to blame for all this either. He was following the narrative that he and his production team were given. And he was the brains behind the show. Actually, he was very young. He was only 31 or 32 at the time.
And in fairness, quite in fairness to David Harvey Productions, quite possibly was following, in a crime line reconstruction, a crime call reconstruction, was following the mandate and summary presented to him and his production team by the Garda on Síochána, who said, no, this is how we want to present this. So, they can't be at fault.
No. So, it was a great show, actually. I remember it, and he was, telling the guy who produced that himself and presented it, So, he wanted to solve crimes. That was his thing, David Harvey. So, that's it anyway. So, look, just needless to say, Mary Kilmartin was not a victim of a serial killer, and she was not a victim of Larry Murphy, okay? In fact, this is the most disturbing thing with this case, is she was ruthlessly controlled, monitored, drugged, abused, and ultimately murdered by people that were close to her. And Pat Doyle was the eyes and ears for those people in Mary's own home.
Yeah.
So she was let down by people close to her there. So very, very tragic, very sad case. So we wish Anya the best of luck and sincerely hope she gets answers in her quest for justice for her mother.
And incidentally, to remind, even up till recently this week, we continue to be in conversation and discussion with Anya, and I promise you, this is a case we will come back to.
Yeah. This isn't the last word on this, certainly.
No, not by any chance.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you want to add there, Mick? Will we move on there?
No, move on to Patricia.
Right. So we've got. The next case we're going to look at is Patricia Doherty. Now, again, Radio Spoil episode 33. You have a full timeline analysis there for Patricia Doherty's disappearance and murder. And again, I keep saying it's another very tragic case. They're all very tragic cases. So I'm not going to apologise for saying this is another very tragic case. Patricia Doherty was 29 years old. She was a prison officer in Mountjoy in Dublin. Now, she'd returned home. She was originally from Kerry, but she'd settled in Dublin with her husband Paddy, and she returned to her home in Tala, Dublin, just before 9 p.m. on 23rd of December 1991. So again, as Mick says often in the past, just put yourself back to 1991, coming up to Christmas there as well. So she'd a busy day, Christmas shopping. She had kids as well, so getting everything ready there. And that evening, at the last minute, spur of the moment, she decided she wanted to get Santa hats for the two young kids. And time was of the essence, considering that shops may be closing, at 9 or shortly after. So she was shift worker. So it was reported she'd long shift on Christmas Eve working in the prison, and this was her last chance to have everything organised. So she was spotted at two locations, one near the Old Bond shopping centre just before it closed, and another by a local pub called Bridget Burke's, both in Tala. But Patricia never returned home that evening. Now, there's maps, and this is really well boiled down now in Mick's timeline in episode 33. So he discusses the geography of all of this as well, if you're unfamiliar with Tala at the time back in 1991 as well. So on Christmas Day anyway, Patricia's husband formally reported his wife missing because they arranged to go to mother's place, and the Irish police were able to find a witness who reported seeing Patricia at around 9:20 p.m. on the 23rd, walking past Bridget Burke's pub towards the Old Bond shopping centre. And then a second witness came forward, stating that he also saw a woman matching Patricia's description getting into a red car at the entrance to Old Bond Shopping Centre. And that's the end of the trail then, on the 23rd. And very sadly, on the 21st of June 1992, almost 6 months later, one James Kelly was cutting turf on the Dublin-Wicklow mountain border, the Featherbeds area. It's an area known as Glassmucky Breaks, and he was shocked to discover the clothed body of a woman just visible through collapsing soil on a bog bank. And over the following days, recovery and forensic examination revealed the remains to be that of Patricia Doherty. Now, Professor Harbison, the state pathologist, did not find evidence of injury or blunt force trauma, and could not definitively determine the cause of death. And he didn't find any evidence of sexual assault or rape, but he couldn't rule it out either. So absence of evidence is not evidence of absence either. And in this case, the fact the body being out for 6 months, it was difficult to get the information from it there. Now, Doherty's husband, Paddy, he's not considered a suspect, but the Gardaí have a firm working theory on what happened, and it's believed she met someone known to her that evening. She disappeared in the Tala locality, and that she wasn't killed up the mountains, but that's where her body was found. Now, we'll discuss some of this later again, but these places are very remote. Depositing a body there for one person on their own would be very, very difficult, and even more so at night. There was no Google Maps or mobile phones or anything like that back then, so it was it would have been very, very difficult there. So I don't think there's any real suspects in the frame, but they seem to have a working theory on what happened, but nobody's ever been apprehended for this either. So, Mick, anything you want to add on that there?
No, what I'd like to do is, I think we'll go through the Antoinette Smith case,
talk about
because I think there's some similarities. We'll have a quick discussion, and I think you need a break after that.
Great.
Okay, so let's deal with Antoinette Smith, quick discussion, and then give you a break, because this is a long haul here.
Right. Okay, Mick. So we'll press on now, and we've Antoinette Smith's case. Now, again, episode 32, Radio Espial, is a full timeline and analysis of Antoinette Smith's disappearance and murder. Again, another very tragic case. She and her friend Marie attended a David Bowie concert at Slane Castle in County Meath on Saturday, 11th of July 1987. Now, they returned by bus to Dublin city centre after that, arriving at Parnell Square around 11 p.m. that night, and they decided to finish the long day out after the concert at La Mariage discotheque on Parnell Street, a short distance away. Now, it was there they met two men that they knew, and having remained in the two men's company for the rest of the night, they all left the nightclub shortly after 2 a.m. Now, Antoinette's friends, party company with the group, decided to head home, while Antoinette stayed on speaking with the two men until all three walked a short distance and to a taxi rank on O'Connell Street. So anyone not familiar with Dublin, if you have a look at Google Maps, you'll see Parnell Street is up at the top, the north end of O'Connell Street, and they all link up there, and there's all walking distance there. So anyway, and then once you get down to the bottom of O'Connell Street, then you're right into the inner city centre, and so they picked up. That's where you get taxis and so on. So they walked short distance to a taxi rank in O'Connell Street. The men got in the taxi to the Ballymun area, which is north part of Dublin city there, up on the way up towards the airport. And Antoinette instead chose to walk down towards O'Connell Bridge, which is the opposite direction, back towards the city centre and across the Liffey. Now, the river Dublin's built on. Now, she was subsequently reported missing by her ex-husband when she did not return to his home to collect her two young children the following day. The ex-husband was Carl. They collaborated in rearing their kids, but they were separated by then. Now, sadly, Antoinette Smith's remains were discovered and positively identified 9 months later at Glendew Mountain in the Dublin-Wicklow mountain border area, and her remains were found with a bag over her head, which some commentators have taken this, as well as the removal of her shoes, as evidence that Larry Murphy was responsible for her murder, as he'd used the same method during an attack on the Carlow woman we mentioned earlier, for which he was apprehended. But this is not conclusive. This isn't even circumstantial evidence against Larry Murphy, because other killers have put bags over their victims' heads. The BTK, Dennis Rader, as I mentioned in the misinformation episode, who active in Wichita, he did that. Colin Earl, the Gay Slayer in London, he did the same thing. So it's anybody getting into that, it is an easy leap to make, and that's not a signature method there. So remains were found there anyway, and from that point then there was, the two men, they need to track them down. There was nobody was ever charged with Antoinette Smith's murder, so that's still an unsolved case. Now, we just want to talk about some of the, we're not saying that we've any evidence, circumstantial or otherwise, to suggest that the last two cases are connected, Patricia Doherty and Antoinette Smith, but there are similarities in the disposals of Patricia Doherty's body and Antoinette Smith's body. Both were found in remote sites in the Dublin Mountains, off the road, and in rough conditions underfoot as well. These are very remote areas. They're, up the mountain, very remote, rough terrain, so just try and picture that there as well. And also, given the dump site's location, it would be very difficult for a single person to perform either disposal, and much more so if it was done at night, unless they were very familiar with the area, or done it many times before. It's this is not an easy task. So we just have a map there showing the Dublin Mountains areas there. So you can see we've marked out 4 places there. I'm
Brian, the viewers are just looking at that map now.
Look at the map now, yeah. So as you can see there, we have the Powerscope Mountain at the bottom there. That's where the 20-year-old woman was abducted and assaulted, and where she was left. We've the Eva Brennan's body was found in Kilkee Road there, and then the other 2 cases we just discussed, the Featherbeds is marked out there, and the Glendew Woods is marked out. Glendew Woods where Antoinette Smith was found, and the Featherbeds where Patricia Doherty was found. So as you can see there,
just to say, Brian, after I did this map and I did a bit more checking, I think on the top one there we see the DSPCA on the map. I actually think that circle is probably needs to be slightly south, slightly lower towards Kilkee.
Yeah, you have the marker anyway. You have the red marker anyway. Folks, the red marker there. Yeah. So just visually, that's where you can see the border between Dublin and Wicklow, and you can see the sprawl. Then it's out the country. You can see the urban sprawl there. Further in, you can see the outskirts of Tala there with Jobstown, Knockline, and so on there, and Sandyford, Ballantyre. That's the M50 running around there. The orbital route around the outskirts of Dublin.
It's essentially this area, Brian, if I might say, it's the outskirts, the southern outskirts of Dublin, getting into Wicklow, and that road, very rural road, it's known as the military road that cuts through from one series of mountains into the other, and we're just shown 4 deposition sites. There are actually other people completely unrelated, not to missing women or where people have been taken up the mountains and given a good going over, a beating, and dumped in a ditch and left to fend for themselves. This is quite a common area if you want to do nefarious things, and that proverbial Irish Dublin Wicklow thing, you be careful, mate, or I'll take you up the mountains. This is what they're referring to.
Going back to Civil War times even.
And this passage 200, 300 years ago, all the way up from the area I come from in South Dublin, Walkinstown, Crumlin. You go off the Long Mile Road, you head up towards Tala, off out beyond Tala towards Blessington, head down. This is that area. This was a track, an old coach track, an old car track that would take people across from one mountain to the other. you did that 200 or 300 years ago, it literally would take you, 2 or 3 days on a horse and cart to get through. Now, modern times, in a car, nefarious means, it's the middle of nowhere. Oh, but CCTV.
No.
Sorry.
No. Get up there, yeah.
You're in the middle of the mountains. Nowhere. This is absolutely desolate. Nowhere. No street lamps. Nothing. No CTV. You want to do anything you want, this is the place you go.
Yeah.
Brian,
that's it.
Continue.
So, again, this doesn't connect these two cases. It just shows, the similarities with the disposal there. So, again, these cases, there's no the suspects. They haven't got have got it far with them at all. We're pushing up on, it's 37 years now since Antoinette Smith was killed, and we're over 30 years as well, coming up to be 33 years later on this year when Patricia Doherty was killed, and there's just no there's been no progress in the cases since. So sincerely hope for their families, their surviving family members, that something will give anyway, and they'll get some answers. So that's, I don't think we'd say any more on these really, Mick.
No, I think I've already said in previous episodes that I've always believed that there is some tenuous links to potentially the Antoinette Smith case and the Patricia Doherty case, but that's all I can say. 29 years, 27 years, missing and murdered. Patricia clothed, Antoinette Smith clothed. Evidence of raping one, not definitive evidence of raping another, but still could be open to that possibility, but it could never be proven. And both cases, likely 2 women not killed at the same location, both women expired through strangulation. Yeah, I mean, it has to be looked at with links. Brian, I think it's time for you to take a break before we move on with the Eva Brennan. So we come back in a second and we'll continue with the Eva Brennan case. Okay, Brian, Eva Brennan. Talk to us about Eva Brennan.
And just to reiterate again, Mick, and to viewers, these cases, as the title says, the forgotten cases. So just want to reiterate, Antoinette Smith, Patricia Doherty, Mary Kilmartin, Eva Brennan. We're going to move on to the others. These are lower profile cases, so they need even more help than some of the more high profile cases. They need a lot of help to get them solved. So just to reiterate that as well. So Eva Brennan, again, there's a full timeline and analysis there on episode 44 of Radio Espial on Eva Brennan's disappearance, and that's well covered there, from the good solid timeline there and geographic description there as well. So anyway, she was 39 coming up to 40 of she was from Ragar, Dublin, went missing on Sunday 25th of July 1993. She left her parents' home in Terranure, so Dublin, which is right near Ragar there as well, and walked 15 to 18 minute distance back to her apartment at a place called Madison House. She had a first floor flat there. Now, she was formally reported missing to Garda Síochána, the Irish police, colloquially call them the guards or the Gardaí, but on Tuesday 27th of July by her father, Davy Brennan, when relatives hadn't heard from her since the recent Sunday afternoon when she left the house and went back to her flat. Now, it's believed she did return to her apartment on the Sunday afternoon, because the jacket she was wearing at her parents' house was later found in her apartment, but there was no witness sighting or CCTV footage recording that recorded her on her journey home. So a delayed missing person inquiry was opened in the first week of her disappearance. Thorough and forensic searches of land and water were undertaken for Eva in the locales of Rathgar and Terranure. They didn't begin for many weeks later. So valuable time was lost. Now, much of the initial search was conducted by her family and friends, and no trace of Eva Brennan was ever found, or what her exact movements were, exchanged with other people and so on, from 2:30 on Sunday, 25th of July 1993, were ever established. Now, in later years, her family would be highly critical of the delayed official search, because valuable time was lost there. And the initial investigation focused on Eva's state of mind, and this is what I was getting at earlier when he discussed the three broad types of narrative that happened here. And unfortunately, she was one of these narratives where her state of mind was looked at, and potentially that, rightly or wrongly, the guards believed that they were most likely dealing with a tragic case of suicide, or that Eva disappeared by choice. So it was she went off, or she committed suicide, and it would be nearly 3 months before the Gardaí began to examine other possibilities. So that's dreadful deprioritization there. So after more than 30 years, no trace of Eva Brennan has ever been found, nor any identified motive for her disappearance either has been established. Her case has been very neglected over the years. In fact, she's often just mentioned as an appendage or onto other cases. I mean, she got a paragraph in Alan Bailey's Missing Presumed book. It's good he mentioned her, but I think it was Sarah McInerney looked at her case in more detail. But Bailey calls out similarities. He was a retired detective. He was heavily involved in Operation Trace, and he calls out similarities with other cases where she was filed as a suicide. And we saw that also many years later with the Ezra Iron case. She was the woman who went missing from Bray in 2011, and there was an interview, a shocking interview with the detective inspector and Ezra Iron's sister, where we mentioned it in the last episode, where he was trying to push this idea onto her sister. The sister stood her ground anyway, because they had CCTV, and he was trying to make out that Ezra Iron, that was her going up a hill. There was no other way off it, so she must have committed suicide.
This was Berna Fiden, Ezra's sister.
Yeah. So Berna, the sister, anyway, recognised it wasn't her on the CCTV, and she stood her ground against that detective who was trying to, push this onto her. So anyway, like I said, that was another case where I think there was an assumption of suicide from the authorities. But with Eva Brennan, anyway, it doesn't make sense, that her family could have harmed her, or the suicide doesn't make sense either, or that there was any cover up around that from people known to her. And I think this notion that she was assumed to have committed suicide led to, as I said, neglect and stagnation in the case from early on, as indicated there, and there was no real action the first 3 months, as we mentioned. And her father was well connected. He had two pubs, and they were well known business family in the area, and he invoked all the political ties he could, right up to the Taoiseach at the time. And even then, there was no proper inquiries initiated. We saw their family as well. Their family had to drag that case along, and those people who should have been conducting it, they had to drag them along with them and do a lot of the work themselves as well. So the basics were neglected from the start. I think some fingerprinting was done in her flat, but beyond that, it wasn't properly searched or forensically examined. Her jacket that she was wearing was found there last time. That indicated she would have been gone back to the flat, but there was a strong suggestion she was back there. But there was that should have been the starting point, really. I mean, the basics of policing, that should have been the starting point. The family home, her flat should have been, turned inside out. There would have been a clearly defined route she would have taken from her parents back to there. House-to-house inquiries along all that stretch of road should have happened. The other flatlanders living in Madison House should have been questioned, and the grounds and beyond should have been, all thoroughly searched. But unfortunately, it didn't happen that way, and it was several weeks before there was anything thorough done. So just to further establish, I mean, during this timeline, Mick stressed that this area is always busy, and from I lived in Harold's Cross in 10 years after this, well, in the early 2000s, and both of the roads that branch off from Harold's Cross were always very busy with traffic. The other road that comes up through Rathmines and goes on up through Rathgarren into Terranure, and the Harold's Cross road that comes into Terranure and onwards, those roads are always very busy. There's always loads of people around, so it seems highly unlikely nobody would have seen her going along that area there. So all those areas, Harold's Cross, Kilmartin, Rathmines, Rathgar, Terranure, always very busy. Now, certain persons of interest connected with, she did attend the prayer group, and they have been identified, but no further leads have been identified since. And we'll discuss some of that later again, because we're going to look at two more cases in the we're going to look at another case in the meantime. But there was nobody's been identified as a firm suspect here, and unfortunately, her case has gone very much cold now. So, anything you'd like to add there, Mick?
No. Other than, as you say, the case has become very stagnant, and as you rightly say, I think we're now into the weeds of dealing with cases, particularly Eva's case, and you described it perfectly there, as they have now become appendages on other cases, and consequently, because they've been treated as appendages on other cases, that's where the misinformation starts drifting in, because they're linked to other cases that they have no definitive link to. Yeah, okay, so we're going to talk more about an important issue that you just mentioned there, about prayer groups and parishes and things, and this connects more into the Claire Boylan case.
Right, so we're going to move again, the same locality 10 years later, and Claire Boylan went missing. Now, Claire, see episode 34 of Radio Espial there. There's a full, thorough timeline there on Claire Boylan's disappearance. Now, she was younger than Eva Brennan. She went missing in 2003. She was 36 years of age at the time. Single, lived with her parents in Terranure, again near where Eva Brennan was. That's upmarket South Dublin, suburban Ireland. It's between Rathgar, Harold's Cross, and some of the outer suburbs. She was in the same neighbourhood where Eva Brennan attended church on the day she disappeared. Now, again, Claire Boylan, like Eva, was of similar age and described her family as shy and retiring and a creature of habit. So Eva Brennan was a creature of habit also. There is, differences there. Just to call out, Claire Boylan did study abroad, so she did venture outside of her home place there, and was a bit more adventurous from what we can ascertain there as well. Anyway, on the morning of Sunday, the 2nd of March 2003, Claire informed her family she intended to travel to Tullamore, County Offaly. Now, that's in the Midlands in Ireland. It's about maybe 60 odd miles from Dublin, and she was going to visit an old school friend, and she left her family home and went off on that Sunday morning. Now, the strange thing is, Claire's friend informed the Gardaí that Claire never made contact with her to arrange the visit on the 2nd of March, nor did she contact subsequently to say anything. And she, after she disappeared, so there was the friend was unaware of what was going on, and there's no evidence to suggest that she did travel to Tullamore that day either. Now, she was formally reported missing by her brother Bernard 2 days later on the Tuesday, the 4th of March, and no evidence or substantial leads in her missing person investigations ever emerged as to where Claire may be or if she was the victim of a crime. So it's a complete blank. Now, just to call out, I actually lived in Harold's Cross at the time that Claire Boylan went missing, and in Ranelagh shortly after. So I spent a lot of time around Rathmines. I didn't know her myself, but I think there could have been much more of a fuss. I'm not saying anything against her family. I'm sure they did all they could. But just comparing it with the Trevor Deely's disappearance from 2 and a bit years earlier, there was posters up everywhere, and that there wasn't the same level of campaign for Claire Boylan. So it was, I don't know, did it get into people's minds as much then either, No, we can't speculate with any accuracy going through the obvious potential scenarios, but I think, going through the usual list, did she disappear voluntarily? Did she have a tragic accident, suicide, murder, or some other reason? Sally doesn't look too good for her now, because she just hasn't shown up, and there's no evidence where she went or what happened to her. As we said, she was a creature of habit, lived close to her family, had fairly set routines. Her life was very much contained within, a mile or two radius there. She worked in the bookshop in Rathmines, responsible job. She was a responsible employee, manager of the bookshop there as well, and had, like I said, creature of habit. But like I said, she did venture abroad before to study outside Ireland, and so she did have a sense of adventure, and she was going to take off to Tullamore there as well. So she was self-sufficient, even though she lived at home with her parents. So at the time of her disappearance, we can't really say anything much more about it. If she'd an accident locally, surely she would have been found. I don't think there didn't seem to be any voicing of any concerns about her mental state, but we don't know that either. We can't confirm that, but I don't think she would have vanished voluntarily. And suicide doesn't sound very likely either from all of the above. She had a good steady job, was good at her job, and seemed to be getting on fine. So that leaves the involuntary death, murder, or something like that. And I don't know. It just seems very clean for any of the other options. Sadly, it seems too clean. She just seemed to have disappeared. It does sound like she planned to meet somebody rather than visit her friend in Tullamore, because maybe she would have she made that up otherwise. She was also reportedly part of a prayer group, but I haven't seen any concrete testimony on that either. But broadcaster Gareth O'Callaghan, he's a keen interest in some of these historic missing person cases. He's convinced that this could be the key to this case, and we'll discuss that in a minute. Just in terms of discussion, I just say what I think myself.
Brian, can I just on the... as best I can understand this case, one of the keys, I think, to it is this whole discussion about Claire possibly planning a visit to Tullamore. I've really struggled, and we did in the timeline, to find out exactly where this information, and I mean accurately, where this information came from that she was planning a visit, because, as you rightly said, the friend knew nothing of it. That she was planning a trip to see me. Well, somebody might have wanted to tell me, because I knew nothing of it. She had previously visited this friend. I think the friend did say yes on occasion. She turned up impromptu. There was one or two occasions where she turned up, so I don't know, maybe that's what happened. But I've never been quite able to put my finger on the Claire Boylan case, where exactly that information emanated from, that at the time of her disappearance she was planning. Did it come from family? Can't it come from Claire, because she's the one missing? So I don't know, but I still believe that could be the key to the case.
Yeah. Why did she say that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it? And it's very puzzling, because I mean, I think she was creature habit. She was known around the area. Her commute to work was short. She lived nearby. She lived in Terranure. She worked in Rat Mines, and so you just go down to Rathgar to get to work and so on. So I think it's puzzling to me that I mean, working in a shop is quite a social job, especially when she was the manager there. So, I would expect for an investigation, you'd be all over that shop. You'd be all over who came in there. If there was any, we were near of CCTV. If there was any CCTV, what was going on there, you'd expect that they'd been all over the shop for who was in there. Was anybody coming in regularly, talking to her, chatting her up, whatever, and because, but there doesn't seem to be any real discussion around that. No, I know they don't name the shop because I'm sure they don't want any negative publicity for them. But at the same time, you would have expected that should have been the first port of call to say where's
absolutely,
most people. And was there any strange characters coming in? Was there anybody calling in regularly and chatting to her? Was she seen chatting to some people more than others, or what? So there was nothing about that in terms of investigation. That doesn't mean they weren't all over the shop, but to me it sounds like they weren't. So that's always puzzled me. I think that should have been the starting point of the investigation, really, to get on top of that. No, I know it was a Sunday, she was off, but if she was going to meet somebody, the most chance she was going to meet, I would think the most likely place she would have met anybody would have been in the shop.
Yeah. Yeah, but go on, because there's another angle
There's another angle,
on
So
this case.
just again, this is another this is a low profile case. As I said, I lived in Harold's Cross at the time. You know, when I heard about it, there wasn't the same campaign as for others. You know, it certainly wasn't all the missing posters they up for Trevor Dealey or others. So cases like this need as much help as they can, and really sincerely hope Claire shows up someday. But it's not looking too good now at this stage, I think, and her parents have passed since. You know, so hopefully she gets answers in surviving siblings' lifetimes. Now, okay, suppose case connections. Now, just there's thought to be connection between three of the cases here. Now, broadcaster Gareth O'Callaghan's convinced the cases of Eva Brennan, Claire Boylan, and Philip Cairns are related through their prayer groups. Now, specifically, the Legion of Mary was that Philip Cairns was known to be a member of Legion of Mary. Eva Brennan was thought to be. I haven't seen anything about Claire Boylan being in the Legion of Mary, but that doesn't mean that she wasn't either. So, but I haven't seen any mention of that outside of what Gareth O'Callaghan has said. So, just a quick background on the Legion of Mary. It was founded by a guy called Frank Duff on 7th September 1921 at Moira House, Francis Street in Dublin. And his idea was to help Catholic lay people fulfill their baptismal promises and be able to live their dedication to the church in an organised structure, which would be supported by fraternity and prayer, parish by parish. Now, just a word on Frank Duff. He was born 1889. He died in 1980. So he was a very forward-looking man of action and very much ahead of his time. And I think he genuinely lived a Christian life by those actions in a period of austere, oppressive mother and baby homes, for example. And there's another feature, Radio Spoil feature on that Mick put together. So, Frank Duff set up homes for single mothers so they could both work and keep their children. And that was unheard of in the 30s because there was a huge stigma for them. So he was very forward-looking, compassionate man in that sense.
A compassionate and humane man who thought about women out of wedlock, maybe, who had a child, and did it the correct way and not exploiting women or abusing women.
Yeah, definitely. And they had to work still and all that, but he gave them a comfortable space to rear their kids, and that he got an inheritance. He was a civil servant and he got an inheritance, and he used that money for setting up homes like that as well. So, a very selfless guy. And he set up homes for prostitutes as well, who wanted to escape from their lifestyle and their abusive pimps as well, because it was awful, dire, squalid circumstances for them. And in fact, there was one, just to show he wasn't a guy sitting in some palace just dishing out orders. He was right down in the thick of it on the street with it, and there was one prostitute retired, and she married her favourite client, and Frank Duff was the best man at the wedding. So he was right in the thick of it himself.
Yeah, he was a classic, I suppose, what you would call, of the 1920s and 30s, a classic social humanitarian.
Exactly.
On very much the kind of work, I think, isn't it, Peter McVery, who continued on with that kind of work right up into the 70s and 80s in Ireland,
and even up to the 2000s.
Yeah.
So these are guys like Frank Duff, very abhorred the social stuff
and people that aren't celebrated in Ireland as heroes.
Exactly.
Cultural people who made change and who asked people to think and show a bit of empathy for other people less well off.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of, I mean, you can understand why a lot of people have anti-church sentiment and so on, but by the same time, you can't throw this is a classic example. They throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I think Frank Duff is one of the biggest babies thrown out with the bathwater here, like that. It's people shouldn't do that either. You should be objective in what you're looking at, and there was enough. He was a guy who did huge good there in Dublin. So he also, just to mention, he organised meeting places for foreign nationals in Ireland as well. So he showed compassion to homosexuals. He called out hypocrisy that created division across different religions, both within religions and across different religions and faiths. He called out Protestant soup kitchens when they were using it for their own ends, and by the same token, he tried to unite people of different faiths, creeds, races, persuasions, etc. So he was very much a guy for putting people together. And he accepted the church's leadership at the time, and he did his work in spite of them. And needless to say, he wasn't exactly top of John Charles McQuaid's Christmas card list.
No, I doubt
or his
it.
predecessor Edward Joseph Burns. They didn't care too much for him. But you know, fair dues to him. He stuck his neck out, and he did great work socially in Dublin. So that was Frank Duff. A quick biography of him. Now, the legions were organised by parish. Just to call this out, because this is relevant in a minute. Why I'm getting into this. Just there's the background. Just in terms of organisation, they're organised by parish, and the members are called legionnaires. And your junior legionnaires were under 18. So Philip Cairns would have been a junior legionnaire. Now, as I said, broadcaster Gareth O'Callaghan is convinced that the case of Eva Brennan, Claire Boylan, and Philip Cairns are related through their prayer groups. Now, I haven't seen any evidence that Claire Boylan was in it, but that doesn't mean that it's not there either. But the suspect in Philip Cairns' disappearance, one of them, look, it'd been done, you know, the Eamon Cook thing. We're not talking about that. I'm very skeptical about that myself, but we're not going to get into that here. The suspect in Philip Cairns' disappearance was a guy called Brian Ellis. Now, Ellis's name came under the radar of Gardaí investigations of other missing person cases over the years. Now, he, you know, so the thinking is that he was involved in the prayer groups there in the two different areas. Now, we have Eva Brennan, Claire Boylan were based in around Terranure area. Philip Cairns and Rathfarnham, which is about 2 miles away. Now, I think certain aspects of this are plausible. Again, there's no evidence here, right? So we're not saying that any of this is fact. I think some things don't add up, but if they're linked together, it can do. But I think, for example, there was an assertion that Philip Cairns and Eva Brennan were friends. Now, in 1986, Philip was 13. This would have been before he disappeared. So if he was 11 or 12 and Eva Brennan was, 31, 32, and they wouldn't have been in the same parish and they weren't in the same group, he would have been a junior legionnaire. So, I don't see that as hugely possible. Maybe it was, and maybe these divisions between parish and divisions between groups weren't that stringent. I don't know, but I haven't seen any other evidence about that. And as I said, I haven't seen anything to suggest Claire Boylan was a legionnaire either. But again, she could have been a junior at the same time as Philip Cairns. She was 8 years older than him. So, there's anything is possible. But again, we've no evidence for any of this. But anyway,
Brian, if I might just say, and we've touched on this before because his name has come up before, the broadcaster Gareth O'Callaghan, and he has made claims and accusations on social media. We do what we do, and we do it here. We do it open, and we do it publicly.
Yeah.
And we don't go down the lines of speculation or accusing people of things that they haven't done just for the sake of it. And I'll repeat again, and I did it in a previous episode months back. Gareth O'Callaghan is very welcome to come on an episode of Radio Espial to go over some of the accusations and links that he's made with cases if he wants to do it, and that's fine with us. If he wants to do it with me and you privately, we're also open to that. But look, all we can say is they are what they are. They remain accusations, and I don't see enough evidence in what Gareth, in respect to him, has claimed. And if he wants to talk to us privately or publicly about that, the invitation remains open.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
So, yeah, agreed, Mick. That's where what I'm getting at there as well. And just, so socially there, I think the parishes are 2 miles apart, 3 kilometres. So, in Eva's case, her main thing, social outlets were family, or church group, and dancing. Philip's Cairns, was family, school, GA. He played hurling with the local club, fishing. He did a lot of fishing with his father and his church group as well. Now, they may have known each other, but again, Eva Brennan was 20 years older, so you just don't know. There's no evidence there. But again, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. But there's nothing there suggested. And just to call out as well, I'm not trying to discredit Garrett O'Callaghan or anything. I think he genuinely wants to do right there, and but hasn't listed sources there. I'm sure he genuinely wants to do right and wants to see things solved there. But there's just not enough to go on there, I think, anyway. So let's just call that out. We've just got a quick map there for just the three.
Yeah, the viewers are looking at it now. So we've got the three cases we're talking about in the wider locales of Eva Brennan, Claire Boylan, and the more historic case of Philip Cairns. So Brian, Rathgar, Ternure, Rathfarnham.
Yeah. So again, they're relatively close. It's 2 miles, say, from the Rathfarnham area up to St. Joseph's Church there in the Ternure area. I suppose in terms of the adults are going to walk all that. Would a 13-year-old boy venture over there to another parish, or maybe his dad might have brought him, as you suggested there yesterday, Mick. But again, it's all speculation. So until something more concrete comes out, we're putting this out there because and it's all out there already.
Yeah, and what we're saying is in relation to Gareth and okay, Philip from the Rathfarnham area, could he have known the two women, Eva and Claire? We're very circumspect about one, 33-year-old Eva Brennan. I'm really struggling to find out how that would have happened. Claire, maybe that's a possibility. Much younger, 19 years of age. Philip would have been 13 years of age. Yeah, there's a possibility. Older teenagers help out in prayer groups, but Philip would have had to have visited her prayer group in the Ternure area and vice versa. It's a possibility, okay, but I still think there has to be a liaison, an intermediate connection. Philip didn't just decide one day to go up and go to a prayer meeting in Ternure. So where's the connection? Was it through his father, who maybe brought him up to this prayer meeting? Was it some other individual, friend, an adult friend? I don't know. That's what we're trying to explore. That's what we'd like to get into more. Brian, go ahead.
That's it, Mick. And just to finish up there, that if there is that linkage via, if there is evidence surfaces that Ellis or somebody else did link all this up, then if the evidence comes, then that'll make it more possible. Not for now anyway. There's not, the evidence isn't there. But we just said we'd share that with you anyway. Okay, so move on to the last case now. This case again is often mentioned in the same breath as the Vanishing Triangle, but actually isn't in Leinster, it's Waterford, so just over the river from Kilkenny, but County Kilkenny. But we have Imelda Keenan now. Another, as I said, very tragic case again. We have two updates on Imelda Keenan there. There's the from August 2023 and January 2024, two appeals there. Now, she was a 22-year-old from Mountmellick, County Laois, and she was living in Waterford City. She was reported missing on the 3rd of January 1994, so this is again over 30 years old. She wasn't in Leinster. Waterford is the easternmost part of Waterford is in County Kilkenny, but it's right on the border there with Kilkenny. So she was actually living in Munster there in Waterford. She's not part of Operation Trace case list either. But as I said, she's often included in the same breath as the Vanishing Triangle, and hers is another low-profile case, much lower profile than some of the others from the time. Now, she had a bedsit apartment on William Street. Now, if you look at Google Maps, William Street leads into Lombard Street, so some people incorrectly state Lombard Street, and I suppose that's it. They must think they're still on Lombard Street if they're walking down from Lombard Street into William Street there in Waterford. So I think that's probably what leads to that. But anyway, the flat was on William Street. And also, just contrary to some reports, the flat was rented by Imelda alone. It was her bedsit, and she did not share it with her fiance, Mark Wall, even though some accounts say that. Even if he did stay over with her and spend time with her there regularly, it was her bedsit. Now, she was attending the Central Technical Institute in Waterford. She undertook a computer course there for a short period, and at the time of her disappearance, she was registered as unemployed. Now, Mel Keenan's fiance, Mark Wall, would later report that she told him on the 3rd of January she was going to the post office to pick up her unemployment benefit and some cat litter at the shop. She had a little cat, that pet cat as well. She reportedly left the flat at 1:30 p.m. and had not returned by 16:30, by 4:30, and whereupon Wall contacted her brother Ned to report her missing. Ned also lived on Waterford. Now, the last reported sighting of Imelda Keenan was about 1:30 around that time, when the local doctor's secretary, who knew her well, stated that she'd seen her crossing the road at the corner of Tower Hotel and Lombard Street. That's the street that William Street leads into. Now, the Gardaí included this information on their 2nd of January 2024 update, just gone there last January. So, while some people consider it credible, this can still be discounted as the wrong date or mistaken identity, and Imelda Keenan's family do not believe that this was Imelda on the 3rd of January 1994, for reasons we'll get to in a minute there. But the family don't believe this, even though the Gardaí still seem to believe it and put it out in their update this year. So, firstly, 3rd of January, the day she was reported to have left home to claim her unemployment benefit, was actually a bank holiday, because New Year's Day fell the previous Saturday. So the Monday was a bank holiday, and the local post office would not have been open that day, so she wouldn't have been able to get her benefit. Now, her family visited the flat, the next day on the 4th of January, and found that her glasses, cigarettes, bag, passport ID, and other belongings were all found in the flat. Now, she wore glasses habitually and needed them to get around. This is very curious that she would have left them in the flat, considering she wore glasses all the time, not just for reading or anything. And her cigarettes were left there as well. So if she was a smoker, presumably if she was going out and thought she was going to be out for a while, she would have needed a fag at some point, so you'd expect she brought her cigarettes. And even more worrying out of character observations were that she had Christmas presents for her nephews and a wreath for her late father's grave were all still in the flat also. So, so you'd expect Christmas presents should have been delivered before Christmas, or at least that she would have made arrangements. People give presents before Christmas, particularly for children and close relatives like her nephews. And also for her father, you'd expect she to put the wreath down as well for her father's grave. So she was also a dedicated diarist, and that's something she instilled in her niece, Gina Kerry. And Gina Kerry's spoken about this. She's in the updates there that Mick presented on Radio Espial. So you can see that there. Imelda's personal diary was missing and couldn't be located at her apartment. So these are all, that's a major red flag, and a lot of what we discussed in the last minute or two there are all red flags. So following her disappearance, even more anomalies began to emerge. And once the family, there was quite a large family there, several brothers, and her mother was alive there. So once the family all conferred, they realised that none of them, and actually Gina as well, Gina was a teenager at the time, so none of them had actually seen or heard from Imelda for 2 weeks prior to Christmas 1993. They realised that once all of them conferred about it, the situation, and her last claimed social welfare payment was sometime between the 20th and 24th of December. Now, her brother had gone to her flat twice over the Christmas period, and during those visits, the lights were on, but the door was not answered. So that was very puzzling there as well. There's no way she wouldn't have answered the door if her brother came. Now, she was close to her brothers, is what I'm saying there as well. Now, all the above leads her family to conclude firmly that the witness sighting of the 3rd of January was mistaken, that lady who saw her on the road, that was mistaken, and that she was murdered up to a week before she was reported disappeared, and that the timeline was falsely reported by her murderer. And just to call out, not Larry Murphy, in case anybody's wondering, not Larry Murphy.
Yeah, here we go again.
So a suspect known to the family and who was close to Imelda from the start would emerge later, but in spite of all of the above anomalies and what the family called out there, investigators have yet to upgrade Imelda's case to a murder investigation. Now, Mark Wall, her fiance, assumed control of the keys of her flat, even though it was her flat for a time after her disappearance, and he did not participate in any searches or campaigns to find her since. So, just to mention as well, this case has been forgotten by many, but not by our family, who worked tirelessly on this case. And you'll see, particularly online there, Gina Kerry's very vocal and does huge work in trying to find her aunt. Imelda's mother, Elizabeth, and brothers Ned and Donal Keenan have all passed away without getting answers. Her brother Jerry and Keenan and her niece Gina Kerry continue to keep the case alive and strive for answers. So, Mick, is there anything you want to add at this point there?
Other than, I think, to talk about, you know, we can, you know, people might accuse us of pointing fingers at everybody else and saying, oh, the shortfall's here, the shortfall's there, this should have been done, that should have been done. We have a major shortfall. We did 2 updates on the Imelda Keenan case, and glaringly, we have still not done a timeline on it, and that's something we're absolutely committed to. I promise you now, in the next month, we do have communication lines open with the family, and I'm going to give them the commitment here and now publicly that we will put together a proper, full, deep dive timeline on Imelda Keenan's case, and that's an absolute commitment from us that we're going to do, provided they work with us and they're happy to. We will do that, and hopefully over the next month, certainly the next 4 to 5 weeks, we're going to do that.
Yeah, definitely. So just, I think, to summarise there, I think major problem with this case is false narratives. I mentioned them at the start of the episode there.
Well, yeah.
From the start, and just a lack of movement off the back of those false narratives. I mean, the initial story of her going missing on the 3rd of January was seemingly taken as fact and perpetuated as the official version of events. Even right up to like the 2nd of January this year, the Gardaí updates, you know, despite what the family had been saying for years, it was still stated that this lady had seen her crossing the road. Like, no, and the family had said that to the contrary, like that's not what they believe. We also have yet another example of an unofficial official narrative where the Gardaí treated her case as a possible suicide or deliberate missing person, and we've seen that already with the Eva Brennan case, the Ezra Iron case outside of the scope of this, and this did huge damage to the cases as well. No, the Gardaí did organise searches locally, including local woodlands and waterways, but you know, the above narratives are borne out by her brother Jerry's statement actually, and this is shocking now, but the Gardaí admitted to him that no forensics were carried out on Imelda's flat.
It's crazy.
So, I just...
Yeah, it's unfathomable. You just... It's just... Oh my God.
No comment.
Yeah,
I just
can't
begin to imagine how upsetting or infuriating or frustrating or... You know, you could list out a whole bunch of things
adjectives to describe it, yeah, but just nothing comes near what a cock-up that was. Yeah. I mean, just reading this, it just... So I can't even imagine what the family think, but I mean, unbelievable. So, anyway, the drive, the sting quickly went out of the case in the intervening years, and, you know, with mistaken witness statements, this made it very difficult and frustrating for the family to push things forward as well. Because when you got an official narrative that says, oh yeah, she went missing on the 3rd, she went to get her check, she was crossing the road here, somebody saw her crossing the road, you know, that's not the family's narrative. No, and we know from communications with the family, there are people, the family understand more about this case than we ever will, and there are people in that community that know more about what went on in that case than is coming out, and that's what we're going to explore in the timeline.
Exactly. So that, and again, there's been various theories. I mean, look, just to call it out, there's no other way to put it bluntly. There's no expectation that Imelda Keenan is still alive. She is believed murdered, and her remains have been concealed, hidden, disposed of. So
and the best thing on Garda Síochána can do, like with cases, like with more recently with the Annie McCarry case, they can just cut to the fucking chase and declare it as a murder, and that immediately releases extra resources within Ungarda Síochána to pour into the case, and then we can get this case solved for the family that they deserve.
Yeah, I mean, look, better late than never. I know it's a cliche, and it's not really, but it's the only bloody way to.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and family keep calling to it for it, and they've shown, they've shown great stoicism and drive with this thing. So hopefully this gets upgraded to a murder, and a proper investigation is launched, just in spite of all the lost evidence, lost opportunities, and false narratives and all the rest of it that have just, like I said, just taken the sting out of this case completely, just left it stagnate. Now, one thing that was mentioned, some building work was ongoing during the time Imelda Keenan disappeared, and it's been suggested her body lies underneath a building. Her niece Jeannie Kerry did receive information to that effect, very specific information actually, in relation to the car park on Boylan Street in Waterford, and so there was a local person that suggested that as well, and was quite specific on the part of the car park and everything. And the family being very forthright in saying that there's people alive in Waterford today who know what happened and could help solve this case. So let's hope they do the decent thing and come forward, and that if they do come forward, that there is the Gardaí and the resources do act on it, and if it does require digging something up, they actually do that, like, and bring sort this case out for the family and for Imelda's memory, like.
Brian, so I suppose we're on to our conclusions, but really I don't have a great deal more to add in our conclusions, other than to summarise. There you have 6, and they're not the only 6. We could have made it 12 cases. Yeah. There were 6 cases of forgotten cases, sometimes, or less emphasised cases.
Yeah.
I'll reiterate again in relation to the I think it was the Claire Boylan case. Yeah. We also did briefly mention Eva Brennan, the Philip Cairns case. We haven't done a timeline on the Eva Brennan case. We have done one on the Philip Cairns. Our invitation is open to Gareth O'Callaghan if he wants to discuss this privately or publicly with us further in where he's going on his own examination of the referred to cases. We will have a timeline of Imelda Keenan coming up, hopefully in a short distance, the next few weeks. Look, beyond that, I don't have anything too much more to add to it. I think we've said as much as we can say, or beyond the usual, which people don't want us to do. We end up just repeating ourselves.
So we'll wrap up. So so just to call out again, these cases are the forgotten cases. They're often considered on the periphery of the so-called imaginary vanishing triangle, and they're still unsolved, and they do not get the attention they deserve. They're certainly not any less important than any of the other cases. All of these cases are very important, and they need as much help and as much support as possible for the families to get answers on their loved ones' fates. Like, so, and these cases, given their relatively lower priority, they need even more coverage, help, and support, I think, to try and move them on. For those get them solved for those families, these women who suffered so terribly, just in summary, there are suspects in the Mary Kilmartin and Imelda Keenan cases. For the others, not one suspect over the years in some of the cases either. And again, there's no physical evidence to suggest that a serial killer, Larry Murphy, was involved. Okay, no. All right. So just bear all that in mind, and this follows on from episodes 1 and 2 there as well. So, and again, I'll say it again, considering the collection of known predators around at the time, and even worse, all the unknown predators, it's just so bizarre that Larry Murphy's the only suspect some quarters will consider.
Yeah, and we forget, we mentioned, I think, was it last week, the previous week, hello everybody, Why be all going on about Larry Murphy? Liam Mullen, hello?
Yeah.
Like, a man who involved himself as a predator with numerous teenagers of the age of from 14 years of age to 18 years of age. But hello, we're not talking about him, but it's Larry Murphy again, you know. It's like, wake up, people, look at what we're trying to present you here, and stop going off in these stupid tangents.
Yeah. It's just,
But we'll deal with the Larry Murphy thing next week or the following week. Not sure when we'll have it together. Hopefully next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and as we said there'll be we've the Larry Murphy case will come up there. Mick will take care of that there. That'll be a standalone episode. And examine Murphy top to bottom from his first convictions and what possible cases, if any, he may have been involved with. So again, folks, be objective, do your course homework, always question the source and their motivations, and bear in mind these cases, the forgotten cases, because they need all the help they can get. And the Imelda Keenan timeline will be coming up in the next couple of weeks there as well. So that's it. Shin will, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening.
Now. Thank you to Brian for putting this episode together. This has taken an awful lot of work, and particularly as this is only his second episode in, and it was an awful lot to put in this play. You pulled it off, man. Well done.
Thanks, Mick.
We'll let you know about our dedicated next episode on Larry Murphy. I'm hoping Mick has to get his head down and now work like Brian did the last week. And so hopefully next week we'll have that for you. It'll be like a effectively Larry Murphy profile of a predator. We'll go through the top and bottom of Larry Murphy, and we'll do all the references to other cases. We'll revisit all the other stuff. We'll let you know on the community channel on the YouTube link, and also reminder for the second time, we have the Facebook community group that we only recently started off in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Join it. It'll be in the links in the description lower below. I think we're about exhausted this weekend.
Yeah.
I think we need to take 2 or 3 days off, get a bit of sun if it's coming.
Yeah.
As always, God bless everybody.
All the
For
best,
God's
folks.
sake, take care of each other. We'll see you again soon.